and welcome to Dragons, Gazelles, and Unicorns. My name is Rosemary Truman. I'm founder and CEO of the Center for Advancing Innovation, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Joey Coleman on the podcast with me. He started out as an attorney at the White House, consulted for over 20 years, and he helps clients turn customers into raving fans, which we would all like to know how to do. And hopefully he'll shed some light on that today. Well, he will. So, Joey, give us an overview of your background. You've had about 18 different careers, from a country boy on a farmer to an artist to a chief experience composer. Give us some insight.
It has been an eclectic path, to say the least, Rosemary. So thanks so much for having me on the show, and thanks to folks for listening. Let's see. I'll give you the speeded up version, and then you can jump in with anything you want, because you're right. There have been a lot of different paths. I grew up in a small farming community in Iowa, went to college at the University of Notre Dame, where I studied government and international relations. Then I went straight to law school, where I studied international law, national security law, and litigation. While I was in D.C., I had the pleasure of working for the United States Secret Service, for the White House and the Counsel of the President's Office during the Clinton administration, and then for the Central Intelligence Agency. Then I was a business consultant for a time, helping Fortune 500 companies, specifically in the area of sales and technology. Then I was a criminal defense lawyer for about 5 years. Then I went and taught at the postgraduate level, kind of executive MBA program type environment. I ran a division of a promotional products company. I then started an ad agency, which I ran for about 15 years, that was doing brands and experience design. And then I became a professional speaker. So now I'm a full-time speaker. I spend a lot of time in the pre-COVID-19 world traveling around giving speeches on stages. Now I do a lot of them more virtually like this. But what I do is teach companies how to keep their customers. And what people often ask is, they're like, okay, Joey, wait a second. You're a customer experience, kind of customer retention expert, but you've got this crazy eclectic path and career. How do those things connect together? And I can totally understand why it seems illogical that all of these threads would come together this way. But the way I look at it is, at the end of the day, in every job I've ever had, the way you succeeded at that job was by having a keen understanding of the human condition. Why do humans do the things they do? And what can we do to convince them to do the things we'd like them to do? So when I was a criminal defense lawyer, it was, how can I convince you to find my guy not guilty? When I was selling promotional products, it's, how can we get you to buy more products? Or how can we create a product for your trade show that will lead more people to be interested in doing business with you? And so every business I've ever had has been focused on that. And what I've learned along the way is that at the end of the day, there's some very common threads around the fact that all customers of every business are humans. And if we tap into their human condition, we can find new ways to navigate them through the customer journey with us.
My gosh, amazing. Well, yes, I agree. We're all humans. I think people forget that. But we have a few things in common. You know,
okay.
So I grew up in West by God, Virginia.
Love it. Love it.
When I was 4, and we had a big farm too. And okay. You didn't mention you're one of 7 Catholic. I'm one of 6.
Oh, very nice. Big family. I like it.
And you've been pulled over 81 times. And
that number needs to be updated. We're now up to We're now up to 90. So yes, I've been pulled over 90 times in my life.
Yeah, well, actually, I've never gotten a ticket either. They pulled me over.
Well, I've got, full disclosure, I've gotten some tickets. So I've been pulled over 90 times. I've gotten 6 tickets, and 3 of them have stuck.
Oh, darn.
No.
Okay, well.
I think that's a pretty good batting average.
Pretty good, yeah. It's really
all
good.
Things considered.
You have a heavy foot there. And you also, this gamut of things you've done in your career, you also have these little figurines in the background behind you, which are quite eclectic as well. If you're able to see the video right now, it's amazing. What are those about?
Well, yeah, so I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2 boys. And so a lot of what I have in the background are things that the kids have given me. You know, we've got, multiple Lego sets that I've received that have been assembled. We've got, these little, kind of designer play toys. We've got, the original, if you're a fan of Seth Godin and his book, Purple Cow, the first couple
Wow.
copies came shipped in an actual milk carton.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, there's a lot of fun little toys in the background. As you might imagine, given my eclectic career path, my thinking process has a tendency to skew pretty eclectically as well. So there's lots of things that are contributing to the visual stimuli.
Well, that's very good. Well, so I want to start with something that I hear you talk about a lot. What is the biggest problem in business?
I think that business is really difficult. I think there's a lot of challenges in business, but I think there's a big problem in business that a lot of businesses don't spend a lot of time thinking about or talking about or doing anything about, and that is customer retention. Everybody's so focused on customer acquisition that they have a tendency to pay attention on how quickly can we bring them in the front door without acknowledging how quickly they're running out the back door. And it really comes down to relationships. What are the relationships that you're establishing with your clients, your customers? How are you onboarding them? How are you building these personal and emotional connections over time that will allow you to serve a client or a customer long term, as opposed to a more transactional interaction where it's okay, they buy from you once and then you're done. I'd rather have them continue to be repeat customers buying from you again and again.
And so how do you consult someone to, first of all, get them in the door and then retain them?
Well, I think there's a lot of folks out there that will talk about marketing and sales, right? The getting them inside the door. In fact, if we were to go on Amazon today and we were to run a search for the word sales in the category of books and to write down how many hits we got, and then we were to search the word marketing and write down how many hits we got, and we were to add those two numbers together, the number of sales books and the number of marketing books, we'd come up with about 1.3 million books that have been written on sales and marketing. Now, let's imagine we cleared those results and we typed in customer experience, customer relationships, customer service, account management, relationship management, customer success, all the phrases and terms that you might come up with to describe what happens after the sale. And we were to add all of those results together, we'd get barely 30,000 books. So what that tells us is, at least in the category of books, for every 43 books written on how to get a customer, there is one book written on how to keep a customer. And I think that's instructive of what's going on in society and how most businesses are operated. There's such an over-indexing or an overemphasis focus on driving new business, acquiring new customers, getting leads, selling, growing revenues that way, that most businesses put all their time, effort, and money focused on activities that fall under that umbrella, instead of, okay, now that we've worked so hard to get a new customer, what are we doing to keep them? What are we doing to deepen the relationship? What are we doing to increase the share of wallet? What are we doing to increase the number of times they buy from us? What are we doing to get referrals from them? All the things that most businesses would really like and really have a dramatic impact on the bottom line don't seem to be a priority or a focus in the traditional business operation.
So how do you retain a customer? Is it, I know you have that, your book, you talk a little bit about your book, and you have 8 phases of a customer journey. Maybe talk a little bit about what the storyline of your book and how people can deepen that relationship with their customer.
Sure. So the book is called Never Lose a Customer Again. And the promise behind the book is that we've all had a customer that we lost that we wished we wouldn't have. Now, sometimes you lose a customer and you're actually kind of excited about that. Sometimes you fire a customer, and that works too. But sometimes you wake up one day to find out that somebody who had been a loyal customer is taking their business elsewhere, or they just haven't done business with you in a long time. And often when that happens, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we're so busy with getting new customers that feels like a gut punch that we don't like, but there's usually not much we can do about it at that point in the game. What the research actually shows is that if you invest time properly onboarding your new customers, getting them into your system of operation, and predominantly in the first 100 days, and we'll talk about that more in a bit, if you get that first 100 days right, you can have a customer for life. Now, this first 100 days time period, with day one being the day they decide to become a customer, they sign on the dotted line, they hand over their hard-earned cash, up to 100 calendar days later, is the most dispositive time in the entire customer relationship with regards to what they think about you and what the lifetime value of the relationship will be. In fact, if on day 101 they are loving you, they're feeling great about the experience, the typical customer will continue to do business with you for 5 years. So I'm not asking you to sprint forever. I'm asking you to invest and to make deposits in the karmic bank account early in the relationship so that you can weather the storm over time.
So what do you do in those first 100 days?
So in the first 100 days, I think it's important to do a couple of things. Number one, to acknowledge that this is the onboarding period and that a haphazard onboarding approach results in haphazard client relationships, right? We want to have a system. We want to have a process. We want to have a methodology. We want to have a philosophy for how we think about bringing new customers into the fold. And what I've done is over the last 20 plus years is develop an 8-phase framework. Now, the 8 phases don't always happen within the first 100 days, but usually you get through a majority of them in the first 100 days. It's very business specific, but this applies to every business and every industry. With your permission, Rosemary, I'll give you a quick overview of the 8 phases. There are 8, so we'll do it kind of fire hose version, and then we can dive into whichever ones you're most interested in talking about. So the first phase is the assess phase. This is when a prospect considers whether or not they want to do business with you. In common parlance, we call this marketing and sales. This is what most businesses focus on. As a general rule, most businesses are pretty good at phase 1. The secret to a successful phase 1 assess phase, though, is to give a preview to the customer of what it will be like when they actually become a customer. Give a preview to that prospect so that they know what to expect. Don't just sell them on the features and on the benefits of your product or service. Give them a taste of the experience. We then come to phase 2. Phase 2 is the admit phase. This is day 1 of the first 100 days. This is when the prospect admits that they have a problem or a need that they believe you can help them with. They sign on the dotted line. They hand over their hard-earned cash. They transition from being a prospect to being a customer. We then go to phase 3, the affirm stage, where the buyer begins to doubt the decision that they just made. In common parlance, we call this buyer's remorse. Now, I imagine all of your listeners, all of your viewers are familiar with the phrase buyer's remorse.
Yes.
But I would ask the question, how many of you business owners, how many of you entrepreneurs have a system and a process in your business to address the buyer's remorse that we know every buyer feels? Very few companies. Most people have heard of this, but they're not doing anything to address it. So in the affirm stage, you need to affirm the decision they just made, remind them why it was a wise choice, and let them know you're excited about the relationship going forward. We then come to phase 4. Phase 4 is the activate phase, okay? This is the first real moment of truth where they receive your product and they go through the unboxing process and they use it for the first time, or you start to deliver on your service, or they show up for a kickoff meeting, whatever it may be. That first real moment of truth where they get to see you in action after they've paid you. And the secret in this phase is to energize the relationship, right? You want to kick things off with a start. You want to let them know that doing business with you is unlike any other business experience they've ever had. We then come to phase 5, the acclimate phase, okay? Now, I'll be honest with you, Rosemary, this is where most people start to fall off the rails. Most businesses start to fail. And that is because your business has delivered your product or service hundreds of times, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. But to a new customer, this is the first time they've ever done business with you. They have no idea where they are, what they've done, where they are now, or what's coming next. Okay? Now, you may say, oh, but Joey, we give them an instructions manual. Folks, you don't read the instructions manual before you start using a product. You may say, well, Joey, we gave them a proposal and a contract where we outlined the various steps of our engagement. Friends, you sign things that you don't read all the time, and your customers are the same way, right? So in the acclimate phase, we need to be regularly reminding the customer how much we've accomplished thus far, what we're working on right now, and what our primary focus is, and how that will allow us to go to the next part in the journey, right? So where we've been, where we are, where we're going. We got to hold their hand and acclimate them to that. We then come to phase 6. Phase 6 is the accomplish phase. This is where the customer accomplishes the goal they had when they originally decided to do business with us. Every prospect, when they buy our product, when they sign up for our service, has a vision of what they're hoping to achieve. We need to make sure we know what that vision is. We need to track that vision across the relationship because guess what? Surprise, surprise, the customer may move the finish line and change their goals. And we need to be ready to celebrate with them when they accomplish it. If we do those 6 phases and we get them through all of those 6 phases, we have the right and the privilege to take them to the 7th phase, okay? The 7th phase is the adopt phase. This is where the customer becomes loyal and committed to us. They're not going to go to one of our competitors. They're not going to push back on price. They are committed. If we're selling, they're buying. And finally, if and only if we've gotten them through all 7 phases, we bring them to the 8th phase, the holy grail, the final phase, the advocate phase, where our customer becomes a raving fan singing our praises far and wide. Now, I don't know about you, Rosemary. I've yet to meet a business owner who has said to me, Joey, I don't need any more referrals. We're good to go. I don't want any more referrals. I don't want any new business, right? And yet most businesses try to jump from that first moment of working together right to the advocate phase. We want them promoting us immediately. When all the research shows they're not going to be interested in making referrals and promoting you until they are certain that you deliver a quality product and a quality service consistently. Once they're assured of that, they're willing to put their reputation and their word on the line and share you with their friends, family, and colleagues. So those are the 8 phases. As you might have noticed, they all start with the letter A. The theory behind that is if you get all of them right, it's like your customer's giving you straight A's, right? You're getting a good report card from your customer. You have a sustainable business. And the last thing I'll say on these 8 phases is if you take them all the way through the cycle to an advocate, and then you introduce a new product or a new service, they go back to the beginning of the cycle. This is the fundamental problem with most customer journeys. Most customer journeys assume a linear path as opposed to a circular path. These paths feed upon themselves. Your advocates, then you can roll out new products and services, and they go through the same model. They assess whether it's going to be a good fit for them. They admit that it is. They sign on the dotted line. They buy the new product or service, but then they begin to doubt the decision they just made, so we need to affirm it. Then we activate them by showing this new product or service. Then we acclimate them to how that new product or service is going to work so that hopefully we help them accomplish their goal. They become an adopter of this new product or service and an advocate for it as well. And it just feeds on itself. And that's how you build a sustainable business over time. You will eventually run out of new prospects. I don't care what business you're in, you will eventually saturate the market and run out of new people to sell to. What you won't run out of, if you play your cards right, is loyal customers who will continue to do business with you. And as Kevin Kelly wrote about years ago in his fantastic blog post about 1,000 true fans, if you have 1,000 customers that will buy everything you sell. They don't care. They're committed to you. They love you. They love what you stand for. Anytime you roll out a new product or a new service, they sign up and buy. You will have a successful, sustainable business long-term that will be a multi-million-dollar business. Okay? So if the goal is to build something that will stand the test of time, customer retention has to be an integral part of that conversation.
So I know, Joe, you often say that these 8 phases also apply to personal relationships. Can you? Can you take us through an example?
Well, sure. I mean, again, because these were designed in the context of serving humans, anytime we're trying to build a personal and emotional connection with a human, whether that's a customer or a personal relationship with a significant other or a friend or a colleague, whatever that may be, the relationship goes through the same steps. First and foremost, the assess. We're trying to figure out, is this somebody I want to be in relationship with? We maybe go on an initial date. We have an initial conversation. We see if sparks fly. We see if there's some commonality there. Then we admit that this person has something that we want. Now, in a commercial setting, it's they have a product or a service to sell. In a personal relationship, it's I like how I feel when I'm around this person. I feel more connected. I feel excited. There's interest. There are sparks. But almost as immediately after we make that decision to become a friend, to start dating them, whatever we do that kind of takes us over that next hurdle, we begin to doubt that decision we just made. We start to notice the things about them that maybe aren't as exciting as the things from the beginning, right? And we're like, oh, I'm not really sure. Then we come to that activate stage. What's that first real moment of truth where the relationship is solidified? Okay, that could be the first, anniversary celebration. It could be the first, major date. It could be, that first bonding moment between two friends where they do something different or unique or, kind of break the trend of what they've been doing in the past, that first real moment. And then we get to the acclimate stage. And let's be candid, Rosemary, this is where most relationships stall out, right? Because they just kind of get boring. You're in the middle of it. It's not as exciting anymore. We're not really sure where we are. We're not really sure where we're going. What's the long-term success of this relationship look like? What are our goals? In a dating scenario or even a friendship, if the friendship isn't growing and the relationship isn't growing, it's dying. There are only two states in nature, growth or death. That's it. There's no such thing as stasis. There's no such thing as a holding pattern. If it's a holding pattern, that means it's getting worse every day, not better. So what can we do to acclimate that relationship and kind of move it forward so hopefully we come to the next phase, the accomplish phase, where we achieve the goal. Now, what's the goal? Well, the goal could be getting married. The goal could be a lifelong friendship. The goal could be, having some epic adventure together. Doesn't matter, but both people need to be committed to achieving the same goal and tracking towards it so that we can celebrate when we get there. If all of that works out well, then we get to the adopt phase where they become loyal to us. And in a personal relationship, maybe the accomplished goal is marriage. And the adopt phase is, okay, now we've got this significant relationship and we become an advocate. Now, we're not an advocate for other people to come be in relationship with that person, but we're an advocate for the relationship, right? We're going out of our way to see what we can do to contribute to the growth and success of the relationship. And over time, we keep cycling back through. Maybe we add kids to the mix, maybe we add a new job, maybe we move to a new place, and we cycle back through those phases once again.
So the acclimate phase is really the breaking point, it sounds like.
For a lot of businesses and a lot of personal relationships, yeah.
Can you give some examples or some best practices about how to overcome the obstacle there? It seems as if communication is key. Connection, creating that connection, the experience. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think all of those things apply. I think communication is key throughout all phases of the relationship and the journey. Let's take this into a business context because I think it'll be easier to illustrate it. In a business context, when it comes to acclimate, the secret here is to be in regular communication with your customers and give them a roadmap, sometimes even a physical roadmap of where things are going. So, for example, I'm working right now with a group of chiropractors, helping them enhance their patient experience. And one of the things that we were talking about in our coaching session this week is giving your patient a physical representation of where they are in the health progress, right? So, okay, here's where you started. This is what you weighed. This is what the situation with your spine is. Here's where your pain was. Here's what we agreed we were going to do to work on it. Now, here we are 2 weeks later. Here's the success we've had. Here's places where we're still working. Here's what we're done. And actually giving people something that they can look at and see where they're going. See, one of the interesting things about humans, Rosemary, is that 70% of humans will tell you that they are primarily visual learners. They like to learn by seeing. And what do we do as businesses? Well, lots of times we give them a written contract that is all words, no pictures. There's a reason why the age-old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, has stood the test of time. Because often, if we show someone a picture, they have a much clearer understanding of what's going on. The other thing is humans, as a general rule, are horrible at noticing their own progress. It's easier to notice progress and movement in others than in ourselves. So, for example, I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 boys, and they're growing every day. Now, I'm not aware of their growth every day necessarily because I live with them. But when we go visit their grandparents, my parents back in Iowa, for example, in their kitchen have a wall where all the kids and grandkids get measured on the wall every time they come to visit. So when we go visit them, what might be once every 6 months or even once a year, we can literally see the growth that has happened. And sometimes often it is astounding to us as the parents just how much growth has happened physically in the 6 months, let alone mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. So when it comes to your customers, what are you doing to give them a visual marker of the growth and progress? I think almost every business could spend some time looking at how are we tracking growth and progress and how are we putting that information in front of our clients and realize that there are huge opportunities to show them the value you're delivering.
So almost it sounds as if you want to take a picture, a snapshot of the before, and then as you go along, you're taking snapshots of the progression, and all along the journey, you have a picture of the journey and the milestones as you go along.
Absolutely, yeah, and mark those milestones. You know, it's interesting. Architectural Digest magazine, every year there is one issue that is their best-selling issue, and it's their before and after issue, where they show pictures of the house before, and then after the renovations, they show pictures of the house after. There's a very clear psychological reason why this is their number one best-selling issue every year. And that's because humans, as a general rule, are horrible at anticipating what something could look like in the future. We're actually also horrible at really acknowledging what things look like in the past. And we're usually pretty confused about what the reality of today is. So we're just not that good at any of this stuff. And that's where, to your point, having an actual photograph or a picture or an image that says, here's the reality today, here's where we were in the past, here's our vision of where we're going in the future, and then show them that progress. There's a reason why architects use blueprints. They want to show what the plan for the future is. They have renderings and sketches, and then they give those instructions to the builders who actually go through and build it. Now, if you've ever built a home or been around a home while it's being built, you know that there are periods where it doesn't look like anything that you hope it's going to look like. But you got to keep the faith, and you got to keep that vision in mind of where we're hoping to get to, what we're hoping to accomplish in the long term. Your customers are exactly the same way. You got to give them the picture, and then you've got to hold their hand as you march your way towards that finish line.
Joey, I've done a lot of strategy consulting in my lifetime. And what we always do at the beginning of an engagement is a current state blueprint and KPIs alongside of it. And the blueprint actually is a picture. So, for example, if it's a technical architecture, you draw a picture of all of their crazy computer systems. As an example.
Sure.
Usually it's growth. I usually do growth strategy, but technology pictures it's like the before is usually a mess, and the after is like much more beautiful.
Absolutely.
And then you measure the KPIs so they can actually see the progress. For most of my clients, it's been the numbers. The top line and the bottom line.
Sure.
And how do they get more profitable?
And what's interesting, Rosemary, is different people are hardwired different ways.
Yes,
right?
They
so
are.
It sounds like
really
your clients are happy to look at the numbers.
They love
what
it.
I will tell you is statistically, most humans need more than numbers. They need the picture. They need the idea of where this is going. It's not enough to look at a spreadsheet or a KPI. And I'm not against KPIs. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the challenge most businesses have with KPIs is the person who's creating the KPIs and who's watching the KPIs is more motivated and connected to numbers than the employees and the staff members who generate the numbers that come out of the KPI. Math anxiety is a real thing. Most humans, especially North Americans, especially Americans, don't really like numbers and math. If you're somebody who is totally fine with numbers and you like numbers and you get excited by numbers, fantastic. More numbers to you. But don't presume that your team is all operating the same way. They may generate more from pictures, in which case we can do a chart. Instead of just reporting up the KPI number, we can do a bar chart that shows the improvement. Lots of times that simple change in the way the information is presented changes the behavior more than even tracking it would.
Yeah, well, Joey, I have a funny story about that, a personal story about the visual that was scary. So I was on a plane. I got upgraded to first class. I was all excited. The bottom line is that the steward accidentally knocked all my teeth out with the tray table.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't get the tray table out, and he yanked it out, and he hit me in the face. He broke all these teeth. So I went to the dentist, and the guy, the first dentist I went to, obviously everybody on the whole plane was appalled. There was blood splurting everywhere, and it was gross.
This is an insane story. I did not expect the story to take this turn. For those of you listening, it's okay. If you were watching on the YouTube channel or the live stream, don't worry. You're not missing any visuals right now. Your mind is creating them for you.
Plus, they're good teeth, see?
There you go, exactly. They look great now. So clearly I can see the after. I don't know what the before was like.
Oh, my God.
Tell me how we got from where we were to where we are.
So he did this model of my mouth, and then he told me all the things he's going to do. And I was like, oh my gosh, he can't touch my mouth. He actually did create a model though. So he told me the journey was too scary. So I went to a really young doctor, and she also gave me a picture. And so it was about the way that the information was presented and how she was going to do things. It was very vivid, and she was a brand new dentist. She was fantastic. So of course I went to her, but the other doctor scared me to death. I had to tell that story.
Yeah. So what's interesting, first of all, I appreciate the story. It's an insane story, but I think it illustrates the point. And the point is different customers are going to relate to different things. Now, it sounds like the first dentist who you didn't work with did the model, showed you what it was going to be like, but maybe over-explained all the details of things that were going to happen to the point where it scared you. Whereas the second person said, here's the vision of what we're going for. They explained the pieces that were relevant to you, but they didn't get overly excited explaining all the details. And we see this in the medical profession all the time, right? And in the legal profession and in accounting. In any profession where you're schooling was a big part of how you got to where you are, there seems to be this desire to prove knowledge by telling you everything about your case or everything about your situation, even though the average layperson doesn't want to hear any of that.
Right.
See, I think what's interesting with most entrepreneurs is we are so committed to delivering value that we overwhelm our customers. This happens all the time when I do client journey mapping. We'll map out the journey and all the communications they're having. And I did one recently with a guy who his business was to help entrepreneurs who were feeling overwhelmed create systems in their business. The way he did this is through a series of coaching calls, videos, PDFs they could download, books they would read, in-person meetings, live sessions, little cohort accountability groups. Is anyone getting exhausted yet? Because I am. Just detailing all the different ways. And we mapped out that first 100 days journey, and what we found is that they were having over 200 interactions with their customers in the first 45 days of the relationship. Now, the crazy thing is, they came from a place of we're delivering value. We're solving your problem. We're getting it done. But their target market was people who were feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So what we did, so they were adding to the overwhelm. So what we did is we said, look, everything you're doing is great. Let's just cut it by 2/3. Instead of delivering all of those interactions in the first 45 days, let's spread them across 150 days. What they noticed is their retention went up, their success went up, their customers were happier. So I would encourage your listeners and your viewers to consider, are you fire hosing your new customers? Are you trying to deliver so much value so quickly that you're actually overwhelming them? And would it be better to just turn down the pressure on the nozzle just a little so they can actually get a drink?
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm guilty of the fire hose.
Fair enough. And Rosemary, I appreciate the honesty. And here's the thing, so am I. I'm running a program right now where we got into the program and I said, this is going to be a 6-week program. We got to week 2 and I said, just kidding. It's going to be an 8-week program. Because I realized that even though I teach this stuff, I was like, I'm just hitting them with too much.
Too much.
I've got to give them less.
You can see that. You can see it.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. And they were great participants, and they were eager students, and they were doing their homework, and they were participating and active. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for all business owners to recognize that the service or the product that you offer is but a piece of the puzzle in your customer's life.
Yeah.
I get that it's a huge piece of your puzzle, right? It's 8 hours of your day or more. It's what you breathe, what you sleep, what you eat. It's what your big primary focus is. But for your customer, whatever you're selling is just a piece of the story for them. It's not the whole story. And I think the more we can recognize, I want to give my customers the ability for that piece to work and work well and be seamless and effective and efficient. But the way to get there is not to ask them to turn all of their focus to that piece, but rather to help them carve out a comparable amount of time and focus to get that tooled up and progressing well.
So it's really important to be aware of the variety of different people that you're working with and what they're dealing with in their lives.
Absolutely. And this goes back to that personal and emotional connection, right? What are we doing with humans? And acknowledge the realities. I say this from a place of respect. You know, we're recording this in July of 2020. We are waist deep in the COVID-19 epidemic. Yeah. What most businesses right now are struggling. They're struggling with uncertainty. They're struggling knowing when this is going to, quote unquote, be over. They're struggling with customers that have left. They're struggling with customers that don't have as much money to pay. They're struggling with, you know, all these things. And I think the secret to navigating this has been the secret all along, but it's more evident and prevalent today than at any other time in human history. And that is when we interact with our customers, we must come from a place of empathy. We must acknowledge at a deep emotional level what they're going through. And I mean, we've all heard the phrase, oh, walk a mile in their shoes and all that things. Well, the reality is most people barely look at the shoes of their customers, let alone step into the shoes and try to walk in them. So what can we do to come from a place of understanding? Because I think in this time, if we're reaching out to our clients and our customers from a place of empathy, from a place of compassion, from a place of how can I serve you, those are the companies that are going to succeed because customers will remember how you treat them. However you treat your customers during this pandemic time, however you treat your customers anytime, but particularly during this pandemic time, is going to be remembered when we get on the other side of this pandemic. And we will get on the other side of it.
Yes,
the problem is we don't know when.
Yes.
And for some of us, it's going to come sooner than others.
Right.
But the reality is we will get there. We need to make the most of this time to show up from a place of empathy, to work together with our customers, with our vendors, with our employees, with our partners, to make sure that we all proceed together instead of leaving anyone behind.
So, Joey, I'm a firm believer that you can actually learn to be empathetic.
100%. It is absolutely a learned condition.
So, what have you observed in teaching people empathy?
You know, it's interesting. I really haven't talked about this publicly, but I intend to write a book on empathy, but I'm not ready to write it yet. And I know I'm not ready to write it. And I like to think of myself as an empathetic person, but I know I could do more. And what I have learned in teaching empathy is that we need to separate the mental or cognitive concept of empathy from the physical, emotional aspect of empathy. Now, if I were to ask the average listener or viewer, do you think empathy is important? I imagine most of them would say yes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Sure, Joey, that sounds like a good thing. Well, have you thought about empathy? Well, yeah, we think about empathy and we try to look at how we can be empathetic. Well, have you felt empathy? When in your life have you personally experienced someone being empathetic for the state you were in? What did that feel like? What did that sound like? What did that look like? And dissect that to see if your definition of empathy can be a guide or an instructor for how you're, quote unquote, attempting to create empathy with others. Most people, when it comes to empathy, it's a question of first being aware of what's going on with what the other person, which lots of times we just don't even have the awareness. You know, if I may, and at the risk of going off on a tangent, you mentioned earlier how many times I've been pulled over for speeding. And for those that are listening and not looking, I am a middle-aged white male. So my experience getting pulled over for speeding by law enforcement is influenced by my gender, by my age, and by my race. It's not enough for me to say, well, this is how you handle getting pulled over by, if you want to come and learn from me how to get out of speeding tickets, I've gotten out of, 87 of them. Here's how it works. Well, that's fine, but I have to acknowledge that not everybody is starting from the same place when the law enforcement officer walks up to their car. When it comes to empathy, I think we need to explore how to connect with what's actually going on with our customers. If you sell a product to your customer, who is in a demographic that doesn't match yours, have you really experienced what their life is like? Right? So if you're a male selling products to females, how do you really know what it's like to be a woman and use those products? If you're a woman selling to men, how do you really know? What are you doing to explore? And that's why I'm a big fan of having a diverse staff and a diverse team, especially if you have a diverse customer base. Mm-hmm. You want to have people on your team that are looking and saying, I get how that works for you or for this type of customer, but what about this type of customer over here? That just doesn't make sense. One of the things I learned when we had our boys is how much baby products are designed to require you to use both hands.
Wow.
That's not a good model because when you have a baby, often you're one-handed it at best. Mm-hmm. And so when you think of opening baby packaging, theoretically we should make it more conducive to one-hand opening. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? Well, I've worked with companies where one of the things they did is they actually physically tied the second hand behind people's arms and had them use the product. And they said, what's it like now? Oh, geez, this is really hard. Yeah, no kidding. Or they brought babies in and they said, hold the baby and try to do this with one hand without dropping the baby. Right? So in your business, what are you doing to truly step into the shoes of your customers, to truly experience their life? That, I think, will give you more insight around product development, product enhancements, client experience, all these things that we know are valuable to our business that we're not going to get to unless we really come from a place of empathy.
That's fabulous. I can tell you, from being pulled over myself and not getting any tickets, it's probably because I was shaking so much when the officer stopped me, and I thought for sure that police car is not for me.
Let
I
me
just
tell
kept
you,
on going.
Yeah, Rosemary, as a former criminal defense lawyer and having been pulled over myself many times, I can tell you, I think it is very rare that the person isn't shaking. But if I can offer another perspective, yeah, the driver's shaking. But do you know who else is shaking? The law enforcement officer walking up to your car. Mm. Because they have no idea what they're going to find.
Yeah.
They have no idea whether they're going to find a law-abiding citizen who just made the wrong choice or somebody who's fleeing from committing a crime. Mm-hmm. They have no idea. And so what we need to do from a place of empathy is to acknowledge, yes, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm freaking out that I might get a ticket, but that law enforcement officer is scared and nervous and freaking out that they might get physically injured or die for doing their job. I think it's important, and I think the way we get through this current state we're in our society is to have a lot more empathy for people who are in a different position than us. I get that you think you know pretty well your position, your worldview, and your blueprint. I would encourage people to actually examine, do you really know your worldview and your blueprint, and how much it's been influenced and how much is based on choice versus how much you've just accepted? But that's a conversation for another interview. What I'd love to have you do, though, is to recognize all these other people that are involved in the interaction. What's going on for them? Because if we can try to just connect a little bit with what's going on for them, I think as humans, one of the greatest gifts we have is that will give us an appreciation and a perspective that actually allows for deeper connection. When I'm sitting at the car and I've been pulled over and I see the police officer walking up and I'm thinking to myself, that person is scared. They're anxious. What can I do to help diffuse the situation? Can I turn on the light inside my car? Can I keep my hands up on the wheel at 10 and 2? If they ask for my license, can I say, absolutely, officer, my license is in my wallet in my front right pocket. With your permission, I'm going to reach into my pocket now and pull out the license. Now, some people may look at that and say, Joey, that sounds insane. Well, maybe, or maybe it sounds incredibly considerate. Maybe it sounds empathetic. Maybe it sounds like, hey, I understand that you've pulled me over, but I'm going to try to give you every reason possible to bring your stress level down so that we can just have an interaction. Now, full disclosure, I get that in a middle-aged white male, that is an easier conversation for me to have. But I think if we all start to look at ways we can have these conversations, it changes the conversation we're having as a society.
Joey, you've been so fabulous today. I'm speechless. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Oh, how about I leave with this? Lots of times when I talk about client experience and customer experience and creating personal and emotional connections and empathy, what happens is the people listening start to beat themselves up. They start to think of all the places where they haven't delivered a great client experience, or all the places where they haven't been empathetic, or all the relationships that could have had deep personal and emotional connection that don't. What about being gentle with yourself? What about saying, all right, yeah, I didn't set this up and run this the best way possible, but I did it to the best of my ability at the time. And now that I have new information and a new perspective and a new awareness, I commit to doing it differently going forward without lambasting myself, without punishing myself, without beating myself up, without shaming myself for what happened in the past. We are all, as humans, on a spectrum, on a continuum. Ideally, we're trying to have tomorrow be better than yesterday, but it doesn't always work that way. The only thing we have control over, in my opinion, is our commitment to try to do better. And for me personally, it's a commitment that I try to double down on every day. I try to start each day with, all right, what worked well yesterday? What didn't work well yesterday? What's my intention for today? And how can I do my best to go through the day thinking about the experience people are having, thinking about how I can more empathetically connect to folks in a personal and emotional way. And as long as I'm making progress, that's all that matters. The finish line isn't the goal. Cervantes wrote in, centuries ago that the road is better than the inn. And the idea behind that phrase is that the journey is better than the destination. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs have such over-indexing and over-focusing on the destination, the goal, the exit. When are we going to hit 1 million? When are we going to sell? When are we going to go public? Fill in the blank. I don't care what your goal is. And as a result, weeks go by and months go by and sometimes years go by without us actually celebrating the progress we've made. In the same way that your clients need a visual reminder of where they are in the journey, you as entrepreneurs need a reminder of where you are in the journey. Be gentle with yourselves. Try to do better next time, but recognize that the road's better than the inn.
It is. and practice being empathetic. You have been a fabulous speaker today, Joey. I'm really thrilled and honored to have had you on the podcast.
Well, thank you,
very,
Rosemary.
very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to everybody who watched and or listened. We appreciate your time. Hopefully there were a couple little nuggets there that you're able to apply to either your professional life or your personal life, and I wish you all the best in the first 100 days and beyond.
Yes, thank you.